Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the All In Crypto podcast. I am your host, Rupert, and today I am delighted to be joined once again by Rob Allen over at Future Payments, Australian Payment Plus. Rob, of course, is a massive advocate for Hedera Hashgraph, its ecosystem, and some of the amazing things that they're doing, which we're going to be getting into in this video. So welcome on board, Rob. How are you?
Hey Rupert, yeah, I'm great to be back. Hot and sweaty night here in Sydney, but I'm delighted to be here to talk about my favourite subject.
Yeah, we're absolutely delighted to have you back on. And I think one place that I want to start that we didn't really get to touch on the last time you were on is everything going on in America. If you're into the crypto space right now, you're really looking at the United States and wondering what's going on and how perhaps all of this is going to affect our still relatively small but yet to become extremely significant industry. So I just really want to start with your general thoughts. You know, how are you looking at what's taking place in the United States generally as it relates to the cryptocurrency space?
Yeah, I mean it's impossible to avoid the relentless news that's been coming out since President Trump's inauguration, and of course in the last day we've had the crypto czar making an announcement, shoulder to shoulder with some of the most significant committee chairs in the American government, talking about a golden age of digital assets. And I mean, the mood music is so different to just a month ago. So, for the Web3, for the crypto space in general, it's and those of us who have been through a long crypto winter over the last few years, it's a breath of fresh air. It's still just the spring, though. It's just the green shoots. We expect, I think, in this space, fast results and relentless news cycle. And I don't think we'll get that. I think there'll be a kind of a slow build up, maybe not super slow, because I don't think Trump works like that. But I think the big announcements are yet to come. Talking about a golden age of digital assets is exactly the narrative that we need to hear. Whether or not that's sort of how aligned that is to the America First policies, or more generally to the for the crypto space globally, we'll find out very soon, I think.
Yeah, it's a very exciting time. I really like what you sort of picked up on there in regards to the change in environment. I think there was a little bit of disappointment perhaps in regards to the conference that took place yesterday. Like you say, David Sachs, the crypto czar, rubbing shoulders with some of the kind of titans of America. But these things don't happen overnight. And the fact that we're now at a stage where we're having specific conferences by the American government on this industry, I think just is a testament to how far we've came. And I think everybody, certainly if you're interested in Hedera, is kind of watching all of this and kind of wondering what role it may or may not play. Are there any links with America specifically? Of course, there are some. Hedera is obviously an exceptionally useful technology that America could, I guess, utilize if they wanted to, but nothing that official thus far. So I definitely share your interest. I think it is a real testimony to how far we've came. And I think, people shouldn't expect things overnight. Nothing good really comes that easy. And I think we're on a broader trajectory now that's a very positive one. One thing I want to pivot onto very quickly, because there's so much that we are hoping to cover today, is what's happening in America in regards to ETFs. Now, what are your thoughts on all of this? Because I don't think it was on my bingo card to see the likes of Eric Balanchunas and Bloomberg put out Hedera as one of the first in line to actually receive an ETF. And I know there's something going on there with Canary Capital. Their sort of flow of money or flow of ETFs started with the combo. ETH BTC, Bitwise has now been approved for their combo ETF. Litecoin's 19B4 is acknowledged. What do you think about the Hedera ETF? What's your thoughts on that?
I think it was a surprise to all of us, to be honest. But the The Canary Capital CEO talks very eloquently about why they selected Hedera and HBAR for their ETF submission. And part of the reason for that is, Hedera has steered so far away from the regulatory grey area over the last few years. The founders are American. The governing council is obviously, some of the world's biggest enterprises. With Delaware incorporated in terms of the LLCs. So, the SEC and its attitude towards crypto is always something that Hedera has been very keenly aware of, and as such, and for some of us, too far from the line. A few risks would have been good, but we've never been set up like that. And as a result, we never received a Wells notice. There was never included in any of the lists of enforcement actions that came out of the SEC. And I think now that has borne fruit because we are seen as the cleanest of clean, the crypto that's most likely to proceed without any hurdles. There's no baggage or anything. And like it's I was delighted to hear that that this is now kind of in train, and that the key industry pundits are actually actively talking it up and talking about its very high chances of being approved. And this was also helped by that surge before Christmas, which took us from around 53 on CoinMarketCap up into the mid-teens, which for most of us, was just a validation of where we think that Hedera should have been all along. Although most of us think that we should be in the top 10, but certainly up there in that group, ready to surge into the top 10. But also, it puts us in the right place to be considered for some of these ETFs as they're now coming along. We had the ETF out of the German stock market there, so there are precedents, and the exchange traded products and exchange traded funds are going to be one of the core themes of institutional adoption of in the crypto space in 2025 and 2026 and beyond. So I think Hedera is incredibly well placed for that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We recently interviewed and we're yet to release Duncan Moyer, who I'm sure you're familiar with.
Duncan, good friend.
He's now the president of 21 Shares.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely blown away talking to him. And I learned a hell of a lot about ETFs, because I think we look very hostilely towards ETFs, perhaps if we're crypto native. This is all supposed to be about self-custody and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think ETFs in some ways fly against what this industry was perhaps born out of. But actually, the more I've learned about ETFs, the more they make absolute sense. You can actually get exposure to Hedera through an ETF once one is approved, and we already have ETPs in Europe. You can actually get exposure to Hedera on a far cheaper basis in terms of fees and spreads through an ETF. So it's actually cheaper to buy Hedera through an ETF. And if you're somebody that doesn't want to bother with self-custody, all of this sort of stuff, you're essentially trusting the likes of perhaps 21 Shares, a big institution whose reputation is on the back end of keeping you safe, to do so. So I'm really warming up to ETFs. I'm very excited to kind of see what comes out of all of this and kind of see the almost acceptance of Hedera as a genuine asset through those vehicles. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that. I mean, I know Duncan. He's obviously on the board. Anything you want to add to that?
Well, Duncan says it all. I mean, he's an incredibly eloquent, very experienced man in the space, and he's still on the board, the Hedera board. So he left Aberdeen, joined 21 Shares, stepped down from the board, and then reapplied for one of the unaffiliated independent spots, and was voted back on by the governing council. So, I mean, that's a great endorsement of what a champion and advocate he is for Hedera. So, Yeah, I think we are, like I said, we are so well positioned with the enterprise use cases, with the governing council in the state that it's in, with a lot of use cases being driven through that, with our continued regulatory approach, and just general positioning in the market. I think we couldn't be better placed for the next year or two as institutions start, and and investors through the ETFs start switching aim and looking for the undervalued cryptos, and I happen to believe that we're one of them.
Yeah, big time. I think we all, certainly what happened in December when we sort of shot up in market cap and gained our rightful place. I think personally, I think our rightful place is in the top 10 when you take out stable coins, certainly top 5. When you look at Hedera as a whole package, there's really nothing that can compete with it. And that's certainly a journey I had to go on in regards to realizing that through researching it. But one thing before we get into sort of the niche things that Hedera is doing, and certainly impactful, we'll talk about AI, IoT, and things more broadly. What kind of a role do you think Hedera is going to play in tomorrow's world? Because I think a lot of people perhaps, they hear about all these great things that Hedera is doing in all these different areas, but some people miss the bigger picture of just how impactful this technology is, and perhaps the reason why we're getting products that are developed around it. What's your kind of big view of the role that Hedera is going to play in the world that we're moving towards before we break it down into some of the areas?
Oh, it's has always been, and like you said, I've been a very, very long fanboy of the technology in all the roles that I've played, and it's always been that Hedera represents the future of the internet. I mean, it's literally that, a decentralized internet running on Hedera, all solutions and applications, built on in the same way as Web 2 applications are built on Hedera. Oh no, sorry, on the internet, using the traditional protocols, and people who weren't around in the 1990s or before, we used to HTTP and knew all the protocols. No one does it now because we're so far abstracted away from the wires, as it were. We're in a similar place. The internet was formed from the ARPANET, and all that origin story is kind of well known, and the stories have been told. But it was hosted on big mainframes, that were owned by either government or military or Cisco or Sun Systems. In much the same way as our governing council are now, hosting the nodes in this first phase of decentralization, and then beyond that, more and more nodes. 100-year business, 100-year network has time to grow and not take risks. So that is the founder's vision. That's Lehman and Matz's vision, and that's what I bought into all those years ago. And I see no reason why that shouldn't be the same. We are evolving. The technology is being added to. We have Hyro now, which is the open source project under the Linux Foundation, the only layer 1 as part of their new decentralized trust network. So it's getting exposure to this whole new world of developers who can now build on it. And all of the applications, as we'll get into, the huge range of different use cases that are being built, a testament to the general purpose nature of the network. The high scalability and low, super sustainable aspects. All of these things contribute to it being a general purpose platform that decentralized applications can be built on. And so I see no reason to think anything other than I've always thought, which it will be the platform for the future of the internet. And a lot of the roadmap, that has been published and some that hasn't, kind of reinforces that view. Not only the open source aspects, but the fact that the Hedera instance is the main net, but also the design choices around sharding that will allow it to scale almost infinitely. The path to decentralization that was set out all those years ago, we're still on. And now, Hashgraph, our core engineering team's HashSphere product, which is a private instance of the Hedera stack, allows for use cases that need perfect privacy protection, or where there are maybe a kind of a short-term version of Hedera that needs to be set up that is effervescent and can be torn down. All of these things now become possible, and it's all kind of interoperable. So I'm super excited about the future for Hedera, because all of those promises that have been made, they're not always made in time. The things come along and resources are limited. So, for example, Hashgraph, or when it was Swells Labs, took over a year to really supercharge the EVM and make it fully EVM equivalent, and really optimized to the super speed of the network itself. But that's been done now. We're talking about things like block nodes and Blockstream, which is new technology that takes us to another level. And then ultimately we'll go to community nodes and then full decentralization. So, there is the future is really, really bright.
I couldn't agree more, and I think it's the reason I kind of wanted to touch on that before we dive into specific areas that Hedera is really impacting, like AI, IoT, and of course finance. We're moving towards, and it was said in the Crypto Czars conference yesterday, this kind of internet of value, and that really is an internet where values sent or used or interacted with as freely as we interact on the internet of information. Um, but really, I think that was a great place for us to touch on, because a lot of people kind of they get sidetracked, or they don't quite see the big picture. But this is the evolution of how we do things in the world globally. And I think Hedera is one of the few DLTs out there that's actually capable of doing that. Um, Before we move on to AI, Governing Council, and we'll touch on this, I guess, again towards the end. But I know you've previously said, I believe, that you think we might fill all those seats by the end of the year. Do you still perhaps think that?
It's a perennial question I get on my weekly podcast with Brandon. You didn't define you didn't say which year, but I assume you mean 2025. Um,
Yeah,
Look,
2025. How likely do you think it is? Yeah.
so the normal answer. There's two parts to the answer, right? Our membership committee is charged with kind of managing the funnel. There are a number of our partner organizations actively recruiting new governing council members. Plus, those recommendations and referrals internally, and some come kind of naturally to Hedera because they're interested in the technology. Membership committee, MEMCOM, does the heavy lifting in terms of taking them through the process, and has a fairly high bar to get over. As we have fewer and fewer seats, there's this kind of I guess the bar goes higher, because we've got different sectors that haven't been fulfilled yet. So health, for example, NGOs is another one. We set on a path of actually covering all sectors and geographies, and we've done a pretty good job. But that's the nature of our decentralization. Decentralizing trust, which is what blockchains do. For Hedera at the moment means the network is managed by organizations that you would not expect to collude against the network, and it would never happen. So that's where the trust comes from. So yeah, we've got a strong pipeline for Memcom, pretty deep pipeline. We have quite a few advanced applications that are kind of ready. What happens is, once the membership committee makes a recommendation to the governing council then votes. So votes on based on the recommendations, but still has a vote on every single new member. And then everything goes dark, right? Because we have market integrity policies, which means that no one knows the timing of the announcements, and that's the right thing. So we know the vote has been taken. We don't always know that what the result of the vote is until the announcement is made. But the announcements themselves are in the hands of the new governing council member, because mostly they're exchange listed, and they have market reporting requirements, and they'll have media and comms kind of hurdles to jump through. So once there's an agreement that they should join the governing council, it's entirely over to them. So there are a number of governing council members. Actually, we've rebranded to the Hedera Council, so I should probably start calling it the Hedera Council. But there's a number of council members that are in line, and I don't know where they are in that line, but I am expecting a few announcements to come fairly soon. And whether or not the council is filled by end of December 2025, I frankly would be surprised if it weren't. But that's not alpha. That's just me speculating, and I've been wrong before. And everyone who's ever asked this question, I've tried to dodge it.
Wow. And I won't push you on who they are. I think this is something I certainly look forward to. The Nairobi Securities Exchange, that was huge for me and a real kind of showcase of what Hedera is doing. I love the fact that they're looking to branch out into healthcare. This technology isn't just impactful in regards to finance. Healthcare is a massive, it's the industry that I come from. And there's so much inefficiency there, just like there is with the financial system, just like there is with perhaps Web 2 generally. There's all these kind of weaknesses that distributed ledgers can solve, or AI. I can't wait to sort of see what comes out this year. So, Rob, I don't want to push you. I know you can't say specifically, but if you were to hesitate a guess on when you think a new council member would be announced, Q1, Q2, roughly, when do you think an announcement like that might come?
I am expecting announcements every quarter this year.
Wow. Okay. I'm not going to push you on anything more there, Rob. But I'm sure you can understand not just my excitement, but everybody's excitement. Not only do you probably get that question asked on your weekly sort of meetup with Brandon, I've had the question in the comments section a number of times saying, when you get Rob on, please ask him about the council. I want to jump into some of the specifics. I want to talk about AI, because I don't think that AI is the rage right now. Obviously, on Monday, we saw what DeepSeek had to announce and how that affected the markets, just how much of a shake-up, a kind of new player into the space, or I wouldn't say new, but an announcement like that was. What I don't think a lot of people realize is with Web 2 infrastructure, there's a lot of weaknesses with it that distributed ledgers solve. You can essentially, through connecting various elements of Web 2 to Web 3, you can solve a lot of the sort of data sensitive areas where people can hack, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a perfect kind of marrying up between AI and the innovation that is and distributed ledgers. Could we maybe start with a bit of an overview on just how you think something like Hedera could be used in regards to a technology like AI?
Well, absolutely. I read something last year that likened AI to capitalism and crypto to socialism, because one's truly libertarianism, and AI represents pure centralized concentration of data. And so never the twain shall meet, right? Except we've moved away from purely central structures because of a lack of trust, and I think that's accentuated with AI and this incredibly rapid development in that on that side of things. Crypto and Hedera in particular has a far greater longevity, although in technology terms, it's only 12 years, 14 years or so, 16 years actually from Bitcoin. So there is on a technology level a natural meeting, a marriage between the two, and it comes at trust, right? So the trust layer. How do you trust the large language models and what they're telling you? How do you trust the data from which that those results was drawn? What is the integrity and the provenance around that whole data model that very, very soon we're going to be trusting many of our decisions upon? Many life decisions are going to be deferred to AI, and we've got to get ahead of that. Now, and to do that, to embed, anchor AI and agent decision making and all of that good stuff into a trust layer, you need to have a highly scalable, super cheap trust layer like Hedera. And what then happens is you can select the key operations or the key data points through those models and effectively log them. You can log them to the trust layer. So for us, it will be via Hedera consensus service. And that as a basis for trusting AI is, the kind of the first element of the governance around AI. What's really lucky is that one of our founders, Lehman Baird, actually has a PhD in machine learning. Now, this is one of his first loves, along with all the others, right? So he's thought through many of these things. We have an AI working group within the governing council, which, like many of our committees or other working groups, is a kind of meeting of minds. You've got IBM in there and Dell and all the big parties within the governing council, all of whom are very, very keenly focused on developments in AI. So there's this kind of top table discussion that's kind of sharing notes and working through things that feeds into TechCom and the roadmap and Lehman's kind of contributions. So there's a lot of work going on how these technologies merge. But we've got real world examples as well. So, my favorite one is Prove AI. So the Casper Labs team, a different blockchain, chose Hedera to migrate and move on to because of this scalability and low cost and being kind of the perfect trust layer for them to build their AI governance applications around. We have we talked about healthcare earlier, so we have Acor. So Acor is one of the long-standing application builders on Hedera, run by an amazing guy called Jim Nasser. They are very focused on healthcare and AI as it applies into healthcare models, clinical tests, privacy and use of one's data for those things. So there's another kind of merge of the two. You mentioned NVIDIA, so the verifiable compute features delivered by Equity Labs for NVIDIA and Intel are building into the firmware of the actual chips the ability to do this kind of key operation logging as well. So you don't hear about this from other chains because they're not they don't scale like Hedera does without compromising on other key things like security. So Charles Atkins, when he went now he's gone to the foundation, one of his key and core themes of 2025, and we'll come back onto this later, is AI. So, it is a real strong focus area for Hedera. And many of us think that, we've missed a few waves over the last few years. We were late to the DeFi party, late to the NFT party. But this really is the kind of the perfect combination of themes that are converging, and Hedera is already riding that wave. As you know, there's a whole bunch of them, but that is one of them.
Yeah, I think it is fascinating to me. I think I've sort of watched AI from afar out for a while, and certainly became very interested in it with the kind of missing piece of perhaps the AI puzzle. Certainly, when you're talking about large language models, you're talking about very heavily data dependent AI driven models that ultimately in the future we're going to be making perhaps life or death decisions on. Well, we need to be able to trust that. What better than a distributed ledger? What better than Hedera to actually play that role? And that's, I guess, one of the main aspects of the combination of these two industries is actually the trust element, provenance of that data. And there is, at the moment, to my knowledge, no better way to do that than actually implementing a distributed ledger. And you perfectly brought up there just how critical the provenance of that data, the trustability of that data is going to be in tomorrow's world, where we will likely be using AI for daily decisions, or life and death decisions. And then this perhaps ventures or brings us on to the Internet of Things, which also the kind of trustability of data is unbelievable. But before we dive onto the Internet of Things, there's also a security issue with AI that blockchains solve, because not only does it provide provenance, and I guess it's in that kind of trust category, it also makes these AI systems significantly more secure. And you can imagine if AI becomes as impactful as we think it's going to be, hacks in the world right now are extremely bad. Can you imagine if the kind of AI systems that we're all using get hacked? Distributed ledger solve this.
I mean, we get quite futuristic very quickly. If we start talking about iRobot, scenarios, some of the things that prove AI are specifically looking at uh, address this. I mean, it's specifically around the governance aspects of AI rather than the provenance aspects of AI, and that can be characterized in different ways, but also, multi-party access to AI training data. One of those things. If you're training an AI, then you want to know that it hasn't been spiked or poisoned in any way for unintended or intended but malicious outcomes. So that's less about, I mean, it's as much about provenance, but also security. It's about the security of, the outcomes that the AI is expected to produce. So what Prove AI have said, publicly, is that Hedera, because it's not a blockchain, because it's not a chain of blocks, because there's no kind of mempool, there's no front running, there's no blocks of transactions. Everything is serialized. There's always one transaction in front of another. Then that's the perfect scenario for kind of logging data and serializing data. So these things are kind of standard properties of the hash graph, but are used in a particular way to apply security to AI models. Of course, ledgers are all meant to be immutable, i.e., tamper-proof. So there's a kind of inherent security layer embedded in the consensus layer of a ledger such as Hedera, and so that's another security layer as well. And then I guess there's another aspect which is around standards. I mean, we're still waiting for robust AI standards that the LLMs will have to, comply with or conform to. And compliance or conformance with AI standards can also be codified, or the frameworks for them can be codified and anchored within a trust layer. So, there are many layers of security that can be applied in a decentralized trust way for these AI models.
Yeah, and I think that's going to bring us perfectly onto IoT. So I think perhaps just explaining the concept uh, briefly, but it's a big concept of the Internet of Things. And actually, I think when we look at the relevance of distributed ledgers with AI, it also applies amazingly to the Internet of Things, and we see what the likes of perhaps WiseKey are doing with SealQ. Um, Maybe we could venture down that path.
So, I mean, IoT has been with us for what appears to be like decades now. I mean, the rapid advancement of technology um, has kind of overtaken IoT in many ways. But the Internet of Things was envisaged as unique devices that are connected across the internet, usually with their own IP address, and therefore uniquely addressable with special purposes. So that could be a sensor, that could be your Fitbit or Garmin watch. It could be all of the data collectors at the edge for whatever purpose. And they're connected via a handful of different network protocols, but ultimately, it's that kind of billions or even trillions of devices that surround us all every day and are constantly collecting data, and that's the Internet of Things. More recently, and this your question was about the crossover with distributed ledger technology and how how they affect each other. We have this new acronym, which is DePIN, so decentralized physical infrastructure. So IoT devices have traditionally contributed into the collection of an aggregation of data for infrastructure, whether that be sensors in fields or cameras in factories, or temperature moderating devices, all of those things. Decentralized physical infrastructure is the decentralized networks that support similar or the same devices, but in a more decentralized way. The point about decentralization remains, whether we're talking about finance or tokenization or any of the use cases, it's a trust layer. Decentralization equates to trust, and trust is usually itself characterized by the removal of intermediaries that don't add value, the ability to transact peer-to-peer without anyone getting in the way, the management of one's own keys if one wants it. All of these capabilities are thrown up by these base trust layers. So when you're talking about decentralized physical infrastructure and the IoT as a combination, you then start having really interesting infrastructural new ways of doing things. So two examples of these that are ones that we like to talk about in the Hedera ecosystem: Neuron and SealSQ. So there are others, but they're kind of emerged at a similar time from different areas, but are very good at exemplifying what a network such as Hedera can bring to bear. So Neuron has many things, and it's kind of evolved over the time that we've known them and worked with them. But they're kind of known as being a network that supports drones, and drone ensuring that drones keep to drone corridors for aircraft regulatory purposes. Maybe in the future for the delivery of goods via drones, or possibly when we have personal drones, then we can kind of fly around from place to place. So that they're putting in the networks that are that enable that. They're also opening up APIs and open sourcing parts of their network so that this can proliferate and flourish. And in that example, drones are IoT devices. They're cameras. They move. They can deliver things. So and they're part of this decentralized network then. And Neuron have this lovely explorer called 4D Sky, where you can see where all their nodes are and the data they're collecting from from aircraft actually that are flying around. So that's a great example of that, using that trust layer to ensure that those particular devices, flying devices, are complying with the corridors that they have to fly in, or that they're doing the thing that they're meant to be doing. CLSQ, kind of born from the WiseKey family, and are putting pico satellites into orbit. We've just seen another launch a couple of weeks ago on board a SpaceX launcher, and they have a grand vision about providing this network of satellites, and what their CEO refers to as the transactional Internet of Things. So this is Internet of Things devices utilizing Hedera for micropayments. Now, micropayments was my origin story for Hedera. That's what I was looking for in a network, was tiny payments that can be transferred in real time at super low cost, which is everything that Hedera promises and delivers. So transactional Internet of Things is just that. You've got the ability through this network that WiseSat are putting in place, the ability for future ability for IoT devices to actually make payments to each other. And what that means, and these could be like fractions of a cent type payments, but true value payments, true value transactions are the core of pretty much every incentive model. So if you want the groups of devices to be incentivized in a particular way, then the flow of value through them, and you mentioned Internet of Value earlier, and this is a perfect example of that, being able to direct value transactions and value flow at a micro level, to enable maybe prioritization to take place. One device prioritizes one action over another because someone was paid, or incentivizing local nodes, Joe Schmo on the street, to actually set up a local node to extend the network coverage. Those sorts of things become possible when you start having micropayments on a trust layer for Internet of Things, and then in this case, supported by a network of satellites as well. So it's really, really exciting. And then IoT is used in other ways as well on the Hedera network. I mean, people forget that the data. So we haven't talked about this in the last couple of times, really, but our Guardian ecosystem, which is born from our Sustainable Impact Fund, which is a massive ecosystem of sustainability applications that do things like tokenizing carbon credits for next generation markets. Those tokens encapsulate all of the data which enables that credit to have value and provably have value. All that data could potentially be collected by Internet of Things devices that have signed off on the trust chain for all of that data. So there's many, many examples of IoT and how it can be applied.
Let's maybe talk now about 2025. We mentioned a little bit about the Hedera Council. Let's talk about some of the things you're excited about for 2025. What are you looking at this year, and what are you paying attention to or expecting?
So I think, I mean, I'm really, really positive about this next year and beyond, because with Charles Adkins going to the newly branded Hedera Foundation, that's a recognition by the governing council that there is a new focus. There has to be a new focus. We talked about the change in American regulatory kind of outlook towards crypto. The timing is perfect. Charles has been briefing us in the governing council for the best part of a year. We've been discussing what a more retail focused Hedera ecosystem might look like, and that's not moving away from the enterprise grade, enterprise focus of the past. It's just embracing more of the degen end of the spectrum, and kind of enabled by this new regulatory sentiment. So Charles has gone to the Hedera Foundation to really drive that agenda, and kind of open up the throttle, as it were, for all the interns to run riot across X, which hasn't been the case in the past. We've got a meme community now, meme coin community. We've got excellent and engaging posts on all the social platforms, and he's really come out of the traps hard with regard to that. So I'm very excited to see what the newly kind of reorged and refocused foundation is going to do. I'm very, very excited about the new governing council members and many of the use cases that are now emerging from our colleagues on the council. We've reorged slightly internally in terms of network governance. So we've got, we've streamlined our committees. We've streamlined some of our decision-making process. We've reduced the size of the board. So we've kind of right-sized, as all organizations do over time. So we're set up as well for a very exciting ride over the next year or two. And then there are other things, the seeds that have been planted that are going to start growing, and I'm very excited to see how those turn out. So something like Hyro, the open source project under the Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust, I think that has the ability to transform the developer community landscape for Hedera. And the more developers you get into the community, the more ideas you get, the more energy you get, and then that percolates up into organizations because you have a lot of developer advocacy at more senior and decision-making places, which then get exposed to all of the Hedera goodness, and we see more and more applications kind of being built on the network. We're also going to see a lot more ecosystem integrations, so custodial wallets, bridges, oracles, all of the paraphernalia of Web3. More and more of those are coming, and with that will come liquidity. It'll come from other chains. We've got some of the best, I think, some of the best applications or decentralized applications in the whole of the Web3 space from a user experience perspective. Like our native wallets, our SourceSwap, our native DEX, and many of the other applications. So I think that we've got some really great flagship projects. Earthlings is another one I love. Metaverse, steampunk game. So these are things that will attract people from other networks. And with all of the integrations in place, there's no reason to think that they can't come across. There's liquidity comes across and everything else. So, we're on exchanges globally now. We have the eyeballs. We're constantly coming at the top of, sentiment analysis and some of those things that DeFi Llama and CoinMarket kind of look at as metrics for for engagement, and Hedera is now, always at the top. So I think we have like I said earlier, David Sachs was referring to a golden age of digital assets. I think we're actually entering the golden age of Hedera.
Brilliant. I absolutely love that. And I couldn't agree more. 2025 is, kind of Hedera's bloom, kind of its blossom. I really do believe that.
Mm.
And I'm super excited to see what happens this year, the new direction that's being taken, obviously headed up by Charles to kind of be more sort of retail friendly, all of the institutional side of things, what's happening with the sort of financial markets and the inclusion of distributed ledger technology. We touched on AI and some of the innovations happening there, IoT. Hedera is just this absolute juggernaut, and I think it's just going to go from strength to strength to strength, as we've already seen. I can't wait to sort of share that journey with people like yourself and, of course, our audience. So I guess the last thing for me to do, Rob, is thank you very much for coming on the show. It's always an absolute pleasure, and we really look forward to having you back on sometime soon.
Yeah, thanks, Rupert. It's been great fun. Thank you. See you soon.